The belt sander is the first one we're going to go over, and we're going to use that for our flat edges. Now I could use the belt sander or the disc sander for this. The nice part about the belt sander is I have this bigger area exposed, so if I needed to, I can do it, I can hold it upright. It's a little bit more dangerous, but you just have to make sure you have a nice controlled grip and that your project isn't going to wobble. So you'd want to make sure that you can hold it straight up when you do it. And you also want to make sure that your table is at a nice 90 degree. This table does tilt 45 degrees. Okay, if anything tilts in the wood shop, it usually tilts 45 degrees. Okay, I could tip it up this way. There's a little gauge on this side. Shows me exactly where 0 is. So I want it right at my 90 degree. And you always, always, always want to keep your project flat on the table. You never want to sand it up here. You never want to tip it up. You definitely won't want to try to freehand it up here. Okay, very dangerous. So we're going to keep it flat. And you're going to see this is 60 grit sandpaper. It's a pretty heavy grit. It's going to take it down fast, and it's moving very fast. So I barely have to put any pressure on there, especially with a softer wood like some of these pines and the poplar here. Same safety rules as always. I have my safety glasses on. I'm going to keep my hands back here 6 inches away from the belt. I'm going to be the only person in the yellow box. So now we're going to move over to the disc sander. You don't always have to do both sanders. I could have just come straight to the disc sander and worked over here. It just kind of depends on what you're comfortable with, which one you like. The belt sander in general is going to take the wood down a little bit faster. Where the disc sander might be a little bit slower. Okay. Again, this tilts up to 45 degrees if I want. There's a little arrow here that says it's at 0 degrees. Lock it in place. Again, I'm always going to keep my project flat. Okay. I don't want to sand like this. If I would need to sand this edge here like this, you need to tilt your table up, okay? Or tilt your table down and flip it over so it sands that edge. What happens, or what can happen with the sander, give you a better view of what might happen if you did something dangerous like that, is if you're sanding it, this sander is going to push this way. Your fingers could potentially get, as it's spinning, your fingers could get pulled into it, okay? And you end up sanding down those fingertips. It's not going to be pleasant. Okay. Like I said, these sanders are meant for doing flat edges and outside corners. Okay. The one thing that people try to do sometimes on these sanders is they try to sand corners that are already perfectly 90 degrees. If my piece, I already cut this maybe over on the miter saw, and I go to sand this down, if I push a little bit harder on the right or the left side, it might put a very, very slight angle, maybe only half a degree or a degree, maybe 1 degree angle on here. Okay. Now that doesn't sound like a big deal. For most projects, it might not be. But for some projects, it is a big deal. If I was doing a small box and trying to assemble it, it's going to be, it's not going to fit in right. It's going to look sloppy because it's got that gap. So you don't want to sand the edge down if your edge is a perfect 90 degree. Okay, you might ruin it. If I need to cut let's say that I just need to, I just need a little tiny bit. My board is just a little bit too long. I just need maybe a 32nd of an inch cut off. Instead of sanding it, just take it back over to the miter saw here and just cut it down. So I'll just bring it over here. Get it cut down, and that keeps it at that perfect 90-degree angle. All right, disc sander. The one thing you want to remember about the disc sander is that you always want to work on the downward side of the sander. So it is going to spin this way. So this is the downward side. The sanding pad is coming down towards the table. So as I'm sanding my project, it's going to hold it against the table. If I were to sand on the left side, okay, you can see that, okay, you can see it kind of wants to pick it up a little bit now. The sander is going to be moving a lot faster, but, okay, so you can see the sander is going to want to pick it up and kind of move it. It's more dangerous. Potentially, if you're doing a smaller piece, it might go flying somewhere, so you want to be careful about that. So I'm going to finish up these corners on the disc sander, and then we'll move to the spindle sander to do these inside corners. You might notice a little burning on the harder woods. If you notice the little bit of burning on the harder woods, just try to keep your project moving. Okay, you can see I'm always trying to move these projects as I'm sanding them. That's so that the friction doesn't build up and I overheat my project and it gets a little bit burner. Not a big deal, we can sand that out. But let's take it over to the spindle sander. So with the spindle sander, I'm going to be doing the inside curves now. I have all the outside curves done, most of them. I couldn't really get in that one, it was a little tricky. So I'm going to work these inside curves with the spindle sander. I have different size spindles, and a good idea is always to use a spindle that fits the best. So that one looks like it's a little too big. This one will probably work. Let's see if I have a better size. Probably the right size for this project, yeah, it would be this one. So to change the spindle sander, if you've ever changed a router before, the first thing I'm going to do, if you can see here, I'm going to cut the power before I do that. Okay. I'm going to take the throat plate off. I have 2 wrenches. Okay. I'm going to put 1 wrench on the bottom nut here, if you can see it. 1 wrench on the bottom. Do another wrench, or this other wrench on the top here. No, that came off easy. And I'm just gonna give it a couple spins. And pull it out. Okay. I'm gonna grab the next one. I'm gonna screw it in. You don't really need to tighten it. I'm just gonna give it a little bit of a tighten. It'll kind of self-tighten as you're running it. Just a little, okay? And now I need to pick the right throat plate. You can see this throat plate's too big. So I'm gonna step up to the next size throat plate. Make sure that it's sitting on the table nice and flush. Again, this table does tilt 45 degrees like anything else. And you want to keep your project flat on the table.